The fact that heavy tanks are still played so badly on World of Tanks is a reason why I'm making this video, where hopefully we can showcase to you guys how you can play your heavy tanks much better and end up with results like this one. Now, one thing that I always see wrong with heavy tanks is them camping at the back or taking way too long to progress into a flank. And you can see here in the background we have a game in the Conqueror whereby the Conqueror pre-aims the initial cross and goes for that early damage, but straight away doesn't just sit there and hope that damage is going to come to him. He actually seeks it out and to get more damage and of course get more wins. So have a look at this couple of clips here. Now, it took about 1 minute for him to be able to pick up 1700 damage, and that is because, of course, on Siegfried Line, the common crossing point is when the light tanks or mediums try and get to the mid-ridge in F1 or kind of G1 or E1, etc. Those sorts of areas, it's often a place where the light tanks and mediums will go, so you can farm up damage really easily. And what's great is that he hasn't then stayed there, he's actually now pushing into the town where you can start becoming that heavy tank role, because passing up on early game damage is not what you want to be doing, but a lot of people think that if they just stay in those spots, the early game and free damage is just going to continue to be there, when in reality it just doesn't ever really work out like that. Now, the reason why I'm showing you the Conqueror instead of the Super Conqueror is because I wanted to show you that you don't have to be top tier all of the time. And in this game, the Conqueror is a very solid tank. It has good accuracy, it has good a kind of armor, I guess, if you can get hold down. And that is something that I want to showcase. Now, what you saw there was actually a really good case in point as to how you can use your tank with good turret armor, and also if you can make the hull armor work as well. And essentially what it's all about is that most players, you know, the average players, or, you know, people who are newer to World of Tanks, will try and overpeak a corner because they think that they're going to get free damage on a tank that might be, you know, for example, dealing damage to the STB-1, for example, in this clip. But the key thing is that it isn't always necessarily the tank that you are trying to farm up that is free damage. You'll actually end up being hit by people in the spawn, and especially on Siegfried Line, if you overpeak this area right here, you can get hit from the spawn, the TDs camping in the back, and it opens you up to a whole barrel of laughs from the enemy team, and that is not what you want when you're playing in a heavy tank. You don't want to be taking damage, especially when you can get free damage. Now, the other thing that I really wanted to show in this replay was the great use of the terrain, because there are a ton of reasons why people overpeak corners, and it's because they don't know that they can actually use the terrain to their advantage. And this one, you're seeing here that the Conqueror actually pulls up on the gravel pile or the rubble pile, whatever you want to call it, to enable himself to use the gun depression, which the tank gets, to be able to not only increase the angle of his armor because he's raised upwards, it makes the armor's effectiveness much better because you're now angling the armor even more than what you were originally when you're on the flat, and as well as that, you're then gaining the advantage of finding yourself up against tanks at a better angle. If you're looking down into them, it just gives you so much more options to poke a corner, rather than just trying to pull around, exposing the hull armor and coming away with, you know, trading 1 for 1, or even worse, trading multiple for 1. So just have a look at how much damage he actually farms right here using this exact tactic. Now, with the enemy team realizing that the Conqueror has a brain and he's been using the hold down tactics to come away with more damage, stopping them from really making any pushes over here, he then decides to make a more aggressive push, getting even further forward to find a new position where the enemy team don't realize he can go. And that is exactly where we're seeing him here. And the one thing that is even better on this side is that, you know, in World of Tanks we don't have destructible cover. You can't make your own cover, except you can, and in this you see him using the wreck of the STB-1 to enable himself to go hold down in an area that the enemy tanks are not going to be expecting. And essentially the 57 Heavy just has a ton of problems trying to pen the Conqueror. Obviously there is a way of penning him if he just sits there and takes the hit, but of course as an enemy tank on a lower amount of hit points, you don't want to just be sat there taking hits from a Conqueror and not reliably penning, which is potentially what can happen. So this is a brilliant play from him. It really puts pressure on the T-57 Heavy and also anyone that's in the base, and they're all starting to focus the Conqueror now rather than his team, and it's just generating this easy farm for his team at this point. Now obviously, as a role in a heavy tank, you want to be going for the actual damage, and of course you want to be the one that's on the front line, and since you have a lot more armor, typically you should be able to bounce a few shots, but tons of people do it so badly they end up pulling around corners like we spoke about, but also they end up doing things that essentially are super risky and they're not using their tank how they can. But this replay and these couple of clips are going to show you how you can use your armor, and what better way to do it than to showcase the E75. Now, straight away, the E75 pushes into the heavy corner, or at least the area which side scraping typically occurs, and with the fantastic armor of the E75, with its brilliant side armor, at least for its tier, and in a top, well, basically a top tier matchup, there's only 2 tier 10s on each side, you have the free reins to really do what you want to do, and essentially what he's doing here is just keeping that angle and just monitoring how many of the enemy tanks are firing. He's getting multiple shots into the enemy tanks just by seeing who's firing, seeing how many have fired. Is it worth pulling round? Is it likely to bounce? What sort of tanks are there? And this is what you should be doing in your own game, rather than kind of just going, oh well, I'm just gonna go for it, or I'm gonna just attempt to get the damage and hopefully I won't get penned. A lot of the time when you start doing that, you soon make a ton of misplays, or you start taking a ton of health, and at the beginning of a game in a heavy tank, this is where you don't want to take any damage. And what you'll often find is that the enemy team start to become infuriated with the fact that you're holding down a ton of their teammates, and they'll just start making stupid plays. I mean, for example, the IS-5 there just drove straight out trying to get a shot on the E-75, didn't even manage to get a shot, ended up blocking the shot from that IS-5, and then he subsequently gets taken out. So it's just a perfect example of how annoying it can be for the enemy team for you to just sit in a position like this. And not only that, he's been able to deal 3,000 damage as well. So not only is he just becoming the steel wall for his team, but also the actual damage dealer too. So just superb use of this corner, and of course using the side scraping. What you want to be doing is, of course, once you've taken your shot, you start moving inwards, making sure to keep the angle consistent and not making any kind of sudden turns so that you expose more of your side armor and you start getting penned. And that is really how you can use a tank like this, which has that side armor. And if you've enjoyed this video just even a little bit, please do think about liking the videos. It takes a while to make, and of course I'm here to try and make as many videos that are going to help you guys, and hopefully that's how it's coming across. If you want me to cover anything in specific, leave it in the comment section down below and let me know if there's anything I've missed for this video that you think others would find valuable, and I hope I'll see you in the comment section. And hopefully that's given you an indication as to how the sorts of plays you can make and the differences between kind of making those brash decisions and just keeping that angle, holding the angle tight, dealing those shots of damage, expecting your enemy team to make the misplays. And essentially on a map like Airfield, it is whoever pushes first loses, and this is a fantastic example of what you can do when you do keep your mentality patient, and you also then go and mop up the damage at the end of the game when you've kept those hit points, when you've blocked nearly 9,000 damage. And yeah, it's just a ridiculous result in the E75 to come away with a win like that. Now, with games that we've just witnessed in the Conqueror, the E75, it's hard to keep up in something like the WZ-111-14, which is definitely not as, I guess, meta as some of the tanks that we've witnessed, but I wanted to put it in here because not all tanks that you play, certainly not all heavy tanks that you play, are going to be able to carry as hard as the more overpowered or the more strong competitive vehicles that those ones are, and that's why I wanted this one in here. And it actually shows a really good example of how, if you don't have gun depression and you rely on the fact that you still need hold down positions and you still need to be aggressive, how you can make it work. And that's exactly what we're going to see. So you see an aggressive push right here into the town, and of course coming away with a little bit of early damage, to say the least. Now obviously when you're playing in a tank like this, you can't just go around a corner. You can't be kind of risking it all. You've got to be very opportunistic, and you almost have to treat it like a support heavy tank. So what you want to be doing is thinking about, what are the ways in which I can support my team? How can I use my tank in the right way to avoid taking damage? And also, how can I just be an annoyance to the enemy team, stop them from making certain turns, stop them from being able to counter some of my teammates? And that is exactly what he did early on in this game. Even if he only picked up 1400 damage, he caught the attention of the BZ-176, who was a fantastic tank to get out of the game using the amazing heat penetration that this tank gets, 340 on its heat, and that's really how he's been able to deal with that BZ, and also the fact that he's now moved up into a slightly better position. Now what he does here pretty much just consolidates an easier time in the town area, and it's really that push from when you start winning to really where you can rout the opponents. You end up just surrounding them, causing a load of chaos, and also start forcing the enemy team to make mistakes. And that is exactly what you're seeing here up against the Conqueror, who managed to get hold down in the location that we saw the BZ in. And obviously if you can get him out of there, it's going to help your team out massively. And also if they start to YOLO you from this position right here, it's super nice for your team at the back, such as the T-77 and stuff, to get free shots onto them. So you really stop them from being able to just push, as well as stop them from using the hold down area. And that really opens yourself up to being able to make this play right here, where you come around the building, hide yourself, and get free shots into the side of the tanks. So what we see here is some really good awareness. He finished off the M6Y, and he also finished off the Conqueror, which allows him now to decide what he wants to do next. And rather than trying to push 100% into the next area of the map, he decides to help out the team with the tanks in the center, because once you win the town area, the center becomes a lot weaker and you can easily get damage onto the opponents that are going to be there, which help you win the game, or at least help you to try and win the game in these sorts of situations. And then he's gone straight back to where the E75 is camping in the kind of area in B4 and A4, and essentially he's able to get some extra free shots on him and the TDs, the T103, and that is really how you can add to your damage. Is that extra shot on the Indian Panzer really made a difference. At least if you keep doing that throughout the game, which is of course what the best players will do, they'll find those opportunistic shots, the really valuable ones that can come away and make your game that little bit extra better, because one or two shots can be the difference between you being losing the game and obviously you actually winning the game. And often, a lot of the time when people have 3-4k damage results and they end up losing, it's because they just farmed up damage on tanks at the end of the game or during a point in the battle where it really didn't matter a whole lot. Whereas if you're doing this sort of damage, it really matters a whole lot more, and it gets you that much more damage in the end. Now, rather than resting on his laurels, he decides to actually push down into the dip, which opens him up to try and get shots on the Leopard PTA, as well as actually help spot for his team even in a heavy tank. And that is because he can make these plays because he's got the hit points to do it, so he's not going to get taken out straight away. And it also allows him to take that maybe one shot from something like a Waffle Panzer IV when he's trying to go down into the dip. Now, it didn't happen in this game, but if it did, it wouldn't have been the worst case scenario, even if maybe you would have liked to have kept your health. This one, really nice showing from the WZ, and he ends up just going round, finishing off the tanks, and you can see here from the end of the game how well he's managed to do it. Now once again, rather than sniping in the back, if there was no opportunities for you to get free damage at the beginning, you still have to push your advantage, because otherwise the enemy team will do exactly that and they'll be the one farming you. So straight away the BZ55-2 manages to get up into this location here on Sand River Encounter to be able to really get some free shots of damage, even at this kind of middle stage of the battle with a few minutes having gone. And that allows you to essentially not only make a play from here to push into the various locations, but also allows you the opportunity to get loads of different shots on loads of different opponents and be very fluid in the game, even if you're not in the fastest of tanks, which heavy tanks typically aren't. So just watch how many opportunities come from this. And it's opportunities that are one of the biggest drawbacks of heavy tanks, because it relies on you having the positioning and knowing when to push and when to pull back, and actually getting good opportunities is what enables you as a heavy tank to be able to farm up so much damage. And you've seen it perfectly here up against the TDs in the base, up against the pushers who are trying to push the IS-3 and the T-30 here, and it allows you to really get so many extra shots of damage in from just making that aggressive play. And even if it doesn't work out every single time and you meet something that might not be ideal, you can always leave and you can try and decide where you want to be going if you don't get taken out by something like an FE 4005, for example. Now you can tell how crucial this position is because enemy tanks start YOLOing him, which is a good indication as to, you know, how good of a position he is, how much of an influential position this is, because they're just starting to come around a corner. They could quite easily get hit by tanks in the base, or at least camping on the hill area or the sand dunes, and that allows you to really understand that, you know, you can be making good plays, and this is the sort of thing that you want to be doing. You just want to make sure that, you know, you keep your wits about you, because this will happen in your games in heavies where mediums think that they can overpower you, and it's essentially a case of slapping them back down to where they belong and finishing them off, and that's how he's picked up nearly 5,000 damage straight away. So once the tanks on the northern side of the map have actually been taken out, it's a safe assumption to start moving towards where the rest of the vehicles are going to be. You can use your minimap. It's one of the biggest impacts as to how you can have a brilliant game in World of Tanks, and that is really what a lot of people seem to miss. They never really look at the minimap, or at least it seems like they don't, especially since we now have the feature for ages where you can essentially see where the last known position of enemy tanks was. Typically people don't move a whole lot on World of Tanks, at least, you know, the average players in the game, and that allows you to really find out where the opponents are going to be and make your decisions based on that, or the most recent piece of information that you have. And so what you can do is start to push on this flank, and that allows you to open up another whole can of worms for the enemy team, and they're essentially just being farmed from all directions, and that's exactly the place where you want to be, the kind of wedge between the enemy team and your team, just slamming home rounds left, right and centre, and this sort of position is perfect for that. You just get opportunities to really make that push, and when you are that aggressive tank making these plays, you're the one that's going to get the rewards from finding the backside of enemy tanks, and you can see right here exactly what happens. And because he's kept most of his hit points till the late game, like you always want to be doing, he's able to make plays up against things like the Conway, he's been able to make plays up against the T-34-2, the BZ, etc., the last remaining tanks in the game, and hopefully he's going to be able to deal a ton more damage in this one and get those extra, you know, 1,000, 2,000 hit points of damage into the game to be able to come away with a result that everybody would love to have, and it's all been fact to the idea that he's pushed and made those opportunities arise from just positioning and making sure to use the tank as it's intended. And hopefully these tips have really helped you understand how heavy tanks work and what sort of things you can do in your own games to come away with results like this. So think about subscribing if you do or are interested in seeing this for all of the different classes, as I am hoping to do this, and hopefully we're going to get better at World of Tanks together, because I certainly have from watching some of these plays and some of the top replays from World of Tanks. So hopefully you did enjoy, and I'll see you in the next one coming soon. Goodbye.